everybody. Welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know. This is AJ Hannenberg, known by my companions as the fart wiggle part of the group.
Graham literally just said that. It was kind of great.
He told me to bring the fun and said that's how I did it. Fart wiggle.
I feel like you're airing dirty laundry.
I just figured I'd bring it right at the beginning here. And today, as we always do, we are discussing stocks, specifically a stock that has been falling pretty consistently for the past several years. GE.
Oh, wow. That's unfortunate.
Right? Trying to get into aviation.
Yeah.
All I know is they used to make light bulbs and dishwashers.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Are we going to introduce who we are?
Nah.
Okay, we're just going to go straight in with our bit.
Fine. All right. I'm AJ Hannenberg. I'm joined by Graham Donaldson.
Hello.
And Thomas Magby.
Thomas the Killjoy Magby. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, good. Okay.
Keeps us on track.
Yeah,
he's the straight man. I'm the fun one.
Yeah.
So...
Thank you, AJ.
So yeah, that's what we're doing. Our podcast is here to bring you the world of education in a way that isn't terrible. At least that's what we try to do. And so we talk about books and philosophy and art and all kinds of fun stuff. Mostly books and philosophy and history,
stocks.
history and stocks. So
sometimes in our in between episodes, we do a lot too.
Yeah, that's true. We talk about some other
financial stuff.
Cool.
How crypto relates to the phases of the moon, which is my favorite new theory.
You want to talk about crypto all the time? Yeah.
It's the full moon today. It's October 20th, full moon, and Bitcoin hit an all-time high. Coincidence?
Yeah, literally a coincidence.
No.
Okay, great.
Anyway, so yeah, Graham, can you talk us through your theory on GE? Which way is it going? How should I invest?
So today, gentlemen, we are going to be talking about GE. We're going to be talking about Great Expectations.
Wow. Everyone on YouTube, their mind was just blown by you showing them the book.
That's right. And it's a book by Great Expectations. It's by Charles Dickens. It's a book that for years we taught at Veritas in the senior English curriculum.
I thought you hated this book.
I don't hate it. It's now that I haven't taught it, I actually miss it. I think... I was thinking about it because I've been thinking about it for this episode and I miss it. But
isn't this kind of how I feel about like an ex?
Oh,
like you broke up and now that they're not around, you kind of
you're bad for each other,
they
but you
pop
kind of
into
miss
your
them.
head.
Yeah. But objectively, it's still like not a good relationship. So really, you shouldn't read the book again.
No, it's a great book.
Okay.
It's the thing is, it's a long novel, and we teach it. I mean, I think it was a long novel at the time of year. We taught it right after Christmas for seniors who are slowly starting to check themselves out of their brains.
And Dickens wrote it in serial, so he got paid for every chapter that he made.
Right.
So.
Dickens wrote it in serial, got paid for every chapter. So there are parts where it drags, and it just was not a fan favorite among the students. So that makes teaching it a little bit difficult. But when I think about it just as a novel, it's great. It's actually very, very funny. There's just really funny parts of it. Anyway.
Is it something that's funny the first time you read it, or does it take a while to?
I think it takes a while.
It's nice to fall in love with a couple of characters. I'm thinking of Wemmick.
Yes,
Wemmick is the best bit, and the swearing sailor.
The swearing sailor, Wemmick, Joe. Gosh darn it! I mean, he's just a delight. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about this book, but before we get into it, I have a question for you guys.
Lay it on me.
When you boys were growing up, did you have a strong sense of other people's expectations on you? Did you have a strong sense that like people expected something? Either something really particular, like you were going to take over the family woodworking business, or anything? Did you have like a strong sense of expectations?
You're the one with woodworking in the family?
No to the woodworking, and hi mom. My mom told me I was special a lot.
Aww.
And so, which is really nice, but I also, I felt the weight of some expectations there, but to balance that out, all my friends expected me to be a weird idiot. So it kind of,
worked itself through.
I feel like, they'd all came out in the wash,
yeah.
right? So my mom expected me to be special, and all my friends were like, "You're a weirdo," and I was like, "Okay, I feel like I can thread that line perfectly."
Well, you may be.
I don't think this is what you're asking, but like it mattered that I do well academically, and so it was very important to me to get A's in my classes.
It was. I had the same. Was that an explicit? People sat you down and looked you in the eye and said, "This is what we expect."
I have a distinct memory in 7th grade of the first time I got a B. My mother swears this never happened, but I have this distinct memory of this happening. That I brought home for where we were. You had report cards every 6 weeks to make sure your grades were on track, and one of the 6-week report cards for my 7th grade science class, which was like a notoriously difficult class, I'm justifying myself, came back with a B. and my mom freaked out about this. That like it was the first B I'd gotten in school, as far as I don't remember. And the reason that she wasn't okay with a B is that a B is close to a C, and a C is close to failing. So you could never get a B. Yeah, so
there you go.
I've had that. Yeah, so yes, I distinctly remember.
heavy.
Yeah, so I remember that moment, and then that kind of went with me forward. I also just personally cared about my grades, but that's not the same as someone telling me I had to do well.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about this because in this book, this book's very interesting at the beginning, even just on like a child psychology or child development part. Maybe we're jumping ahead of ourselves. So let's set up the book a little bit. The book is about it is a man looking back on his life, and that man's name is unfortunately Philip Pirrip.
But he has a good nickname.
Well, and because his name
It sounds like somebody drunk was trying to call him syrup.
That's right. And because
Philip
because his name is Philip Pirrip, as a young boy, he could never say his name, and so he just called himself Pip, and everybody called himself Pip. Philip Pirrip, so his name is Pip. Pip, his parents died when I think he was the last kid he was their last surviving child. I can't remember if he's the youngest, but his parents died when he was quite young. No, his sister, because his sister raised him. So his parents died when he was young, and his sister took him in and raised him. And his sister was a number of years older than him, so that she was in her late teens, early 20s when Pip was like a wee little 4-year-old kind of kid. And she married a simple, good-natured blacksmith in town. And you get the sense that it wasn't magic love at first sight, but she needed a husband. He could have done with a wife at the forge. And it was a marriage of convenience because she needed a husband because she had this little kid brother that she was taking care of. And so she marries Joe. How did you always pronounce it? It's spelled like it's pronounced Gaugery. Is that how you always pronounce it?
Gargery.
Gargery?
Yeah.
Gaugery. Anyway, so
I'm sure it was something fancier like Gargery.
No, it's not French.
I mean, how do you know?
Oh, Thomas, this book had a big...
Yeah.
How did you always pronounce it when you read it?
Unfortunately, Joe's last name was not a part of the impactful part of this
I
book.
see.
So, yeah. Pick
You
one.
have no-
Anyway, Joe Gaugery,
no
we'll
dog
go
in
with
this
that.
fight.
No. His
But
name is Joe.
His name is Joe.
That's the important part.
And so he always referred to his sister as Mrs. Joe, which is hilarious. And Mrs. Joe was a menace. She clearly resented Pip and clearly having to bring him up. And Pip says that he was raised by hand. Mm-hmm. And what this means, what to the young mind of little Pip was, being raised by hand meant that she was like smack the crap out of him.
Right.
Which is in fact what she did a lot. She would smack Pip and she would spank him and raise him by hand. This reminds me of, I have some friends, and when they were kids, they had their dad had this board that they would spank them with, and he called it the Board of Education, which is very funny. That is funny. And for some reason, when I always hear that joke that Pip was raised by hand, I always think of the Board of Education, which is delightful. Anyway, and Joe always felt badly for Pip, and so he always tried to sort of, compensate for Pip getting smacked around. On Christmas Eve one day, Pip was out in the marshes looking at his parents' grave and just sort of crying and it was Christmas and he's sad. And he happens to come across a convict, a man who has escaped from a prison boat, which I guess was a thing. Maybe prisons were overcrowded and just put them on boats.
That's exactly what happened. Their prisons were overcrowded. They had no more room, and so they used the barges that were nearby, and they just docked them, and then that was another place to keep prisoners, and they were apparently horrible places.
Yes.
The people died and got diseases, and the conditions were awful. So, yeah, that's what was happening.
So one Christmas, Pip comes across a convict who has clearly escaped from the prison. He's still got his shackles on, and he's near death, sort of having gotten off the barge and I guess scrambled to shore somehow. And this convict gets a hold of Pip and basically terrifies the young boy into getting him some help. And Pip says that he's going to go home, he's going to get some food for him, and he's going to get a file to help him file off his shackles. And the convict says, if you don't do it, I'm going to sick the tickler on you. And Pip doesn't like the sound of that.
Sure.
So he's like, I don't want the tickler anywhere close to me. And that sounds terrible. So
I think I've seen that Star Trek episode.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
So
no good. Yeah.
Pip goes home, steals Christmas dinner. It was a meat pie and half a bottle of brandy. and the file that he stole. He didn't feel bad about stealing the meat pie and the brandy because it's from his sister's domain, and he doesn't really get along with his sister. But he does feel incredibly guilty stealing the file because it's Joe's domain, and he loves Joe, and Joe is a wonderful caretaker. Anyway, he takes it back to the convict, who is pretty surprised that the kid's back with food in a file. He's like, "Oh crap, it worked." And meanwhile, so he gives it to him, and the convict kind of goes from being cruel to being somewhat warm, not really, but somewhat warm, and says, "Thank you, lad," and all this kind of stuff. And Pip then, the convict gets away, and then Pip goes home. There is this weird scene where he's pretty sure that the convict and another man are fighting, and he doesn't really know what's going on. But anyway, Pip runs home, and then his theft is promptly discovered, although they never really know that Pip was in on it because the pie was stolen and Joe's file was stolen. Long story short, the convict is apprehended, and the convict doesn't rat Pip out, and Pip didn't rat the convict out. So there's this moment where the convict is caught, and it's known between the convict and Pip that they didn't rat each other out, and the convict's like, all right, cool.
You're all right.
You're cool, kid. Anyway, okay, cool. That is early on in Pip's life, and he felt super guilty that he stole Joe's file. One of my favorite scenes is that when Pip is returning to find the convict with Christmas dinner and a file, he feels like everybody's judging him and calling him a thief. And he walks by a cow, and he imagines the cow looks up at him and says, "Hello, young thief." And because his conscience is eating away at him.
Yeah, sure.
And I feel like cows would do that if they knew. Anyway. All right. Fast forward a little bit. Pip is destined to become a blacksmith, and because he's growing up in a blacksmith's house, he doesn't really think too much about it. And then lo and behold, one day they get this letter from a noble lady who lives in the town, and she requests that Pip comes to her house to entertain her. And everyone's like, "What? Right. This is weird." His name was put forward by some other person who's a character we don't really need to worry too much about. What's the shopkeeper's name? The doofus. Oh, man, like Pumblechook. Mr. Pumblechook.
I was going to say, it starts with a P. I remember that.
Anyway, so Pip goes to this lady's house, and her name is Miss Havisham. And do you boys remember what Miss Havisham's house is like?
So it's like it's been frozen in time, essentially. And so there's like dust everywhere, and it's like I want to say the clocks are literally frozen at a specific time, and all that comes up later. And is she wearing a wedding dress?
And she is wearing an old wedding dress.
There's a big cake on the table that's been there for forever.
Yeah, it's been there forever, and beetles have eaten all of it, and there's spiders everywhere.
It's every mansion that's ever been in a horror video game.
That's right.
Or if you can imagine, like the Clue movie, except everyone just decides to go home, and then it stays that way.
Yep. Yes.
Very good. Exactly. Yes. So Pip goes there, and he goes to this house, and it is completely frozen in time. And for the little boy, he doesn't really realize what's going on. But for the reader, you realize that this is an eccentric lady who had some kind of traumatic event, and she froze time. She froze everything at the house at that moment. All the clocks have stopped, and she is wearing a wedding dress, and it looks like she's sort of half dressed. She's got one stocking on, one stocking off, and the wedding dress is like caked and yellowed with age, and she's this like old lady, and Pip is terrified of her. Just to jump ahead, it's I thought it was obvious when you read it for the first time that something happened with her wedding.
Right.
She was jilted at the altar, and so then she decides that she's going to sort of like be a real crotchety about it and like freeze everything and hold it against the world.
Well, and exact her revenge eventually, right?
And then exact her revenge eventually.
She's not good at moving on.
She's not good.
No,
she's not good at moving on.
No, she needs like some. I feel like if she had a book club or something, some friends to help her through it.
Some sort of outlet.
Something. I think
like
she's
hot
just
yoga or something.
Yeah, she's just stewing. Like
something.
take a painting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Pip goes to this house, and it's a house that's fallen into disrepair. It is a noble lady's house, but it's frozen in time. It used to have a brewery. The brewery's not working, and it doesn't seem like anybody's living or working there except Miss Havisham.
Doesn't he bump into He bumps into someone. Doesn't he like fight a kid?
Oh yeah, and there's a little kid that he fights. That's
But
right.
he's not connected with.
He's not. Yeah, he is. He's some distantly related.
He's a
to,
pocket, right?
He is a pocket.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a kid that Pip becomes friends with later.
Okay.
Yeah. So this first time he goes to the house, Miss Havisham is invited there, and Miss Havisham wants Pip to entertain a young, beautiful girl named Estella, and Estella is haughty, proud,
I was
and
Haughty, and she.
and she also haughty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Haughty.
She's a haughty.
Okay.
Anyway, oh wow. So and she and Pip play cards.
Yes.
And she is incredibly condescending,
Yes.
and she's incredibly beautiful, and she belittles Pip and makes fun of his clumsy hands and big boots, and when Pip plays a game of cards, she calls the cards after the high class names, and he calls them after the low class names. And they're playing a card called Beggar Thy Neighbor, which apparently is a real card game. And Pip uses all the low Cockney ways of talking about the cards, and she uses all the high received pronunciation ways of talking about the cards.
I got an 8th spot.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
oh, you lot. And she makes fun of him with his clumsy hands and big boots.
Right.
And the effect, and Pip is shattered.
Right.
Absolutely shattered. And at the end of the day, she says he is so upset by her that he goes outside and he tears out his hair and he kicks the wall, and he's just ashamed that he's poor and common.
Right.
Something he's never thought about or never even known about himself. Meanwhile, he sees this other little kid who's there, and he's like, "Hey, you want to fight?" And Pip's like, "No, not really." And he's like, "Come on, man, let's fight. Fighting's what we do." And Pip's like, "Fine." He literally
just, lays him out,
kicks
right?
the
Yeah,
crap
exactly,
out of this
yeah.
kid. And the kid keeps getting up, and Pip keeps laying him out because he's like a blacksmith's
Right.
kid.
And
And
this
this
other guy's
little
trying to be like
he's got heavy-
professional.
that's right.
fighter.
This little
boots.
other fighter, he's like a young gentleman, and he's wanting to prove himself, and
using the right stance.
he's using the right stance, and he's got his fisticuffs up, and he's like, let's put up the fisticuffs.
Yeah,
and
Pip's just hitting him over and over
Pip
again.
keeps
Yeah.
clocking him in the face to the point where he is dizzy, and I think he ralphs behind a hedge at some point. Pip's like, we should stop.
This is not fun.
And this isn't fun. And meanwhile, so Pip sort of savagely beats this kid.
And isn't it all in good fun? The guy's
Yes.
good show.
He's like, good
Exactly.
show, old
Yes.
boy. And Pip doesn't want to be doing this, but meanwhile, Estella's looking out the window,
Yes.
and with eyes on fire, and her cheeks are flushed, and clearly enjoying the violence because she's a monster. Anyway,
Do you really think so?
I think so.
Okay.
Anyway, so she watches Pip beat up this guy, and then Pip comes back, and she's like, "You may kiss me
There
if
it
you
is.
like."
Right.
And does he?
Yes,
He
I think he
sort
does.
of he condescends, or he sort of leans forward and kisses her on the cheek, and she's like, "You may go home." And Pip's like, "I hate her.
But
I love her."
yeah, exactly. Yes.
Rich girls, man. Rich girls will do that to you.
She's so dang stupid hot.
Oh.
I hate it.
So Pip goes home, and he is and immediately ashamed of where he's from.
Yes.
The forge, his clothes, the simpleness of Joe who can't read. Pip is ashamed and saddened. So Pip goes back to Havisham's house a number of times, and he starts to pick up that Havisham is whispering things to Estella, "Get him to love you and then break his heart." Pip's like, "Oh, I wonder what that means." Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, this is weird."
He's not
I mean,
the
it's
smartest.
okay, when you were a little kid,
Exactly.
did any weird stuff happen around you? And you were like,
Probably.
this is certainly normal because everything is weird to you.
Everything.
I remember that my great grandma used to use her dishwasher as a shelf. And whenever I went there, she really didn't want me breaking all her really nice little figurines and clocks and things. And so she would sit me down, give me a little tuna can filled with Oreos, and there was a cookie at the bottom. And it never occurred to me that I could just move the Oreos and get straight to the cookie. I was like, I gotta eat these flipping Oreos, get all the way down to the cookie. So I ate them again, and she would occupy me for hours.
Wow.
Eating
You would-
Oreos
wait,
and cookies.
You would eat cookies to get to cookies?
No, eat Cheerios, not
Oh,
Oreos.
gotcha.
Eat
Makes more
Cheerios
sense, yeah.
all the way down to a little Nilla wafer. And I did that for hours. And she would pull all of the stuff for this out of her dishwasher. The Cheerios and the Nilla wafers.
Didn't think anything of
But
it.
I was 5.
Right,
So
you
I was
didn't know
like,
any
this is
better.
perfectly
Yeah, but
average.
she's not trying to exact her revenge on the
Yeah.
society of men.
But if she was, I wouldn't have known.
Exactly.
Is the point.
Fair point.
Sure,
Okay.
yes.
So,
This is
yes,
fair.
Havisham, and it turns out it's pretty obvious that Havisham has been breeding Estella. She's to.
We do know this at this point.
Oh no, we don't. We
by the
don't. It
end
comes
of the
up
book,
later.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, so but
I mean, you can put it together.
you can put it together that Havisham is like, get him to love you,
Yeah, sure.
and then break him.
She even will tell him. Doesn't she look at him pretty early and she's
Yeah.
like, love her.
Yes.
And you're just
Yeah,
like,
so that
oh
one,
my
yes.
gosh.
He's like, I want you to love her, and Pip's like, yeah, I'm way ahead of you.
on it. I am on it.
And then Estella.
Poor Pip.
Yeah, poor Pip. This poor kid. But he's in love with her, and they play card games, and he comes every day. And when he comes home, his sister is real curious as to what's going on. Pip invents all sorts of stories. He's like, we eat food off golden trays, and I like sit on a dog.
Right.
And there's like a hot air balloon we ride in. And she's like, the
incredible.
aristocracy are crazy. Anyway, okay. Then one day he comes and he comes to Miss Havisham's house, and Estella's gone. She's gone off to like rich girl school.
Right.
She's gone off to France or something to become even snottier. And Pip is devastated. She's gone. She's out of his life. And Pip starts having Pip all of a sudden in his mind decides he wants to be great. He wants to be a gentleman, and he wants to marry Estella. He doesn't want to be a blacksmith.
Because he wants that girl.
He wants
Right.
that girl. And so, even though she's terrible, he loves her. And he decides, I don't know why, but I kind of want to be a gentleman, like Havisham, so I can marry Estella. But I'm not, because I'm a blacksmith's kid. Anyway, a few years pass, and Pip grows up, and he's like 14 or 15 or something. And he's getting pretty blacksmithy, and, like Joe's teaching him all the things, and he just doesn't like it.
Right.
He's like, it's fine, but I just don't, he's tasted the good life. Or I don't know if it's a good life. He's tasted something different.
But I mean, what kid doesn't have that feeling, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's some series of events we don't really need to talk about it. Mrs. Joe gets attacked and bonked on the head and becomes an invalid
Right.
by somebody that had been dissed, who worked at the forge and had been sort of he was a jerk and was dismissed because he's a jerk, and he came back later and bonked Mrs. Joe in the head.
He was slouchy. He was a slouchy person.
He was a slouchy
It describes him as slouching all over the place. He slouched in the yard. He slouched in the kitchen.
And this guy really
slouching.
hates Pip,
Yeah.
and because he thinks
I'll say
that
straight
Pip
up.
has kind of sold him out. Anyway,
Right.
All right. And then one day, Joe and Pip are at the pub, just having a couple of pints, and this lawyer comes in, and he says he is a trial lawyer. Everyone's terrified of him because he puts everybody in jail, and he always wins his cases. And he comes and he's looking for Pip.
Do they find out at this point he keeps his doors unlocked? This is my favorite detail about
Keeps
Jaggers.
his doors unlocked. Oh, Jaggers?
Yeah.
We don't.
The lawyer.
The
Yeah.
lawyer. We'll talk about that later
Okay.
because that's when Pip goes to his
Okay,
house.
got it.
So the lawyer's name is Jaggers. And I'm trying to think of like a Rolling Stones joke, but it doesn't matter. And so Jaggers comes in. He's like, listen, I've got some crazy news. Are you Pip? And he's like, yeah. And he says, you've inherited like this insane fortune,
Right.
and you're going to get it when you come of age, and you are to come with me. There's a benefactor, mysterious benefactor. I can't tell you who it is. Don't ask me. I'm not going to tell you, but I know who it is, but don't ask me. And the mysterious benefactor said that you need to come to London and learn to be a gentleman, and then when you're a gentleman, you're going to be insanely rich and live in gentleman land. And Pip's like, awesome.
This is incredible.
This is incredible. Where'd this come from? In his mind, he's like, Miss Havisham did this, and she wants me to marry Estella.
Yeah, she clearly means me for the lady.
She clearly means me for the lady. She did this.
I mean, I don't blame him for putting that together. She
Right.
was saying, love her.
Yeah.
And then if all of a sudden you have a weird windfall of cash,
Yeah.
you'd be like, well, two
Yep.
and two.
Who else would it come from?
And then
Right.
he's like, okay, I won't ask who my benefactor is, but thank her for me. And Jagger's like, shut up. Don't ask me questions. Jaggers is awesome, and he's cold and calculating,
love Jaggers.
and he's amazing. He's
Yeah,
wonderful.
he's fantastic. He washes his hands a lot.
And so he washes.
Doesn't he?
does,
I don't
washes
remember
his
that.
hands a
Yeah,
lot.
okay.
So then Pip then goes home and he's like, "Hey Joe, guess what? Bye."
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's very sad, but Pip doesn't realize
Right.
that it's sad. And there's this other person who is like Pip's kind of tutor who kind of loves Pip, and he's a real like cad to her. he's like, maybe one day you can marry somebody common. Not me, though. I'm a gentleman. And she's like, you're the worst. Pip.
He's just
He becomes really mean. And so...
so he's perfect for Estella.
He's perfect for Estella.
Okay,
so he's got all this money. He's kind of burned his bridges at home.
she's like, you could be with me, and he's like, I don't want to be so common.
Yeah.
it's just-
So there's this girl. What's her
Biddy.
name? Biddy. Yes. I was gonna say Tilly. No, it's Biddy. Biddy clearly loves Pip, and she says, "Well, I think Pip even tells her about Estella." And Biddy's like, "She sounds like a real piece of work. Why don't you go for someone closer to home and nice?" And he's like, "Sorry, Betty, I'm going for Veronica."
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Biddy, not Betty. Anyway, the joke was
See, I got it. It was great.
Yeah.
so he's going after the rich girl, and Biddy stays at home, and Pip's a real jerkbag to her.
Yes.
Okay, then that's sort of like part one of the book. Then the book shifts to London. Pip goes to London, and he goes straight to a private tutor to teach him to be a gentleman. And the private tutor's name is Mr. Pocket. We don't need to know that. The only reason I mention that is because Mr. Pocket is one of Hannenberg's favorites. Right?
Because I am Mr. Pocket.
You are Mr. Pocket.
Yeah.
Why is that?
He yanks on his hair, which is a thing that I do all the time. He's kind of absent-minded.
He's delightful. He's
super
good-natured.
nice. Yeah, he's a great guy.
What is he teaching Pip? Is it just like all his
All sorts of things.
classes?
Yeah, school classes. He's his tutor.
English, math, all that stuff?
math,
Okay.
all these sorts of things. And Pip's like, whatever. Is there an Estella at the end of
Right,
this?
exactly.
Because-
Yes.
And so he is doing all these classes, and Jaggers is watching over him. There's other students, and one of the students that Pip becomes friends with is this kid named Herbert Pocket,
Right.
Matthew Pocket's son. And it's the boy that Pip kicked the crap out of all
Right,
those years
yes,
ago.
yes.
And so Pip and Herbert Pocket become best of friends, and Herbert Pocket, in a very weird aristocratic way, gives Pip nicknames. What does he call them? I can't remember. Like Flopson or something. It doesn't matter. All I remember is that like Herbert's like, I won't call you Pip, I'll call you Flopson. Or he gives him some name.
I'm trying to look for it.
They become the best of friends. They live it up. Pip gets an allowance from his benefactor. And Pip proceeds to absolutely blow through his money as fast as possible. He does not know how to spend it. Huh?
Starts getting into debt.
He starts getting into massive debt
Yeah.
because he's buying expensive things, and he's like, Estella likes rich boys, and I got to be rich.
And poor Pocket is not, he doesn't have the money to do all this.
Yes,
Right.
and Herbert Pocket is from an aristocratic family that has no money, which is why they're taking in tutors, or to kids, they're taking in students. And so Pip's like, hey, let's go buy like golden-covered hamburgers. And Pocket's like, all right, not again, but okay.
And it's his job. He kind of works as a clerk at this, I think it's like a shipping agency.
Yeah.
And he's like, so what are you doing? And he's like, just getting the lay of the land. Like,
Yeah.
looking at all my prospects. I just got to put my feelers up and find out when my shot is, like
That's
when my
right.
chance is.
Yeah, he's waiting for his one chance to deploy his capital.
And he's like,
but
how long
all
have you been
I
doing
need
that? And he's
is
like,
capital.
for about 5 years. Like he's just, has been way too
Yeah.
long.
And Pip's like, that sucks. You know what you should do? Just get it all at once.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you tried being rich?
tried not being poor. So then, meanwhile, Estella comes back, all grown up, and she beautiful, and she's still ice cold,
Right.
and she mean, but she's gorgeous. And she's back, and Pip, and she's like, oh, Pip, I remember you. Your boots aren't big anymore. And he's like, I have the tiniest shoes ever. And Pip eventually sort of like is not very good at keeping it cool and is pretty obviously in love with her
Yes.
and follows her around.
Yes.
And at some point she's like, listen, stop. I can't love you. And she's like, no, don't take it personally. I can't love anybody. And she's like, all I'm going to do is hurt you. Just leave me alone. I can't love you. And Pip's like, that's what rich girls say, right?
He's like, I think she wants me to love her more.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Isn't that what we actually kind of how responds? Like she's
Yes.
clearly trying to draw me on.
That's right.
Right.
And then a rival starts to appear, and there's this kid who is like better than Pip and comes from a great family, but his nickname is the Spider because that's just how he lives. He just sort of sits there and broods. And Jaggers is like, that kid's like, he's a spider, that kid.
He's got like narrow eyes and a
Yeah.
real thick neck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And but he's clearly like the best of the crop of aristocratic kids.
And he's interested in
And he's
Estella.
interested in Estella,
Yeah.
obviously, because she's beautiful and he's a jerkbag. They're made for each other.
Perfect.
Okay. Then Pip is sort of living large, waiting for to turn the time when the age when Miss Havisham's going to give him his fortune, and this guy shows up. And the guy who shows up is the convict.
Right.
And the convict comes into Pip's house one day. He's like, "Hello there, kid. My name is Magwitch." That's his name. His name is Magwitch, which sounds like some kind of sandwich.
That Magby invented.
I made a sandwich.
Oh my
Yeah,
word!
The Magwitch.
The Magwitch. What
Huge
would you
fan.
put on a sandwich? If you had put a sandwich with your name on it? What would be on the Magwitch?
See, unfortunately, I think the Reuben is already the perfect sandwich. So
You like
I would,
to- yeah.
but I need to make one tiny addition to it, and then I can make it my own.
Could you swap the meat out for lamb? Because wasn't this guy raising sheep? Wasn't that what he
He
did?
was raising
There it is.
sheep. There
So
you go.
yeah,
It's a
make the
Reuben
Magwitch, and it's a
lamb.
Reuben.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like
there
it.
you go,
Yeah,
like
good.
shawarma lamb. Okay,
Wow,
cool.
I'm okay with that. Sounds pretty good.
So Magwitch, as one does, got banished to Australia for his crimes, and when he was there, instead of languishing in a work camp, became a sheep millionaire.
Go figure.
There
right?
you go,
Yeah,
figure.
Exactly.
So he's raised a giant flock of sheep and became like stinking rich.
You referenced this before. This might be tangent that you don't want to go down, but Dickens is writing this like piece by piece,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, do you think that he intended this to be the outcome when he revealed there was? Do you know what I mean? Like
The way he revealed that there was a benefactor.
because he made the choice of a benefactor long before he made the choice of who the benefactor was.
Yeah, maybe.
It's set up. It's set up
Oh.
when he messes.
Yes. It's
So
set up
have
early.
you done
No,
the-
go for it. Go for
yeah,
it.
so it's the guy that he stole the pie
Yes.
and the file
Yeah,
for,
at
and
the
I
very
think it's
beginning.
set up way earlier, and he knew that guy was always going to be the one bringing the money.
Yeah, there's a scene before Pip learns about the benefactor where there's this weird dude that shows up that's kind of like
Yes.
spying Pip out.
Yes.
And it's clearly either Magwitch or one of Magwitch's cronies just to see if Pip's still alive and still
Right.
doing his thing and still where he is. So it seems like the seeds were planted. So
Earlier on.
yeah,
Okay,
anyway.
that's good.
So Magwitch shows up and he's like, I only had one thought while I was raising all those sheep in Australia, and that was to get super rich and make you a gentleman because I thought it would be hilarious. Like if you were a gentleman, well, fine. I wanted to pay you back for your kindness.
I thought it was that.
I wanted to pay you back for your kindness, but also I kind of wanted to like stick it to rich people, and rich people would be real upset if like a blacksmith's kid was richer than them.
Yeah.
And Pip's like,
and also funded by a convict.
yeah, and
Yes.
funded by a convict. Isn't that a laugh? And Pip's like, yeah, oh, crap.
But Pip is crushed by this because
Pip
it
is
means
absolutely crushed.
that Havisham isn't setting him up to marry Estella.
Correct.
So that
And
whole motivation is gone now.
Yeah.
And he's got dirty sheep money.
Yeah,
Yes,
he's got
sure,
dirty
yes.
sheep money. He doesn't want. First he thought it was Havisham that was setting him up, and if Havisham set him up, then like Estella is good as his. Now it's like no, this dude that like looks like he's like a sheep herder, and
He's real crass.
He's real crass, and he swears a lot, and he's
like farts on the carpet.
and he's super into
true?
Pip.
Okay.
He loves Pip as
Yes,
a
a
son.
lot, yes.
And Pip's like, that's really kind, and he feels for Magwitch, but also like you can't bring him to a party. You know, like
Right.
you can't let him know that this is your benefactor. And Jaggers is like, I told you not to talk to me about it.
Right.
I know nothing about this. Also, Magwitch isn't really supposed to be back in England.
Yeah, this is the part where I always get confused in because they're eventually going to try and sneak him
Yeah.
back out.
Yeah.
Is it because he's an escaped convict?
He's an escaped convict. He was banished to Australia under the guise of
oh.
you can't come back.
Got it.
But
He's,
you know,
he's in exile.
He's
Yeah,
in
sure.
exile.
Yeah.
But he's like, dude, I just had to see you in all your fancy clothes sticking to the rich people.
Yeah.
I just had to see it. And Pip's like, okay, that's kind of nice. Okay, then this absolutely crushes Pip.
Yes.
And then Estella is going to marry the spider, and Pip's not the benefactor. Pip's not the benefactor for this, and so he goes and confronts Havisham.
Right.
And a long story short, finds out that Havisham was supposed to marry this guy, and this guy jilted her at the altar and took all her money in cahoots with her brother, leaving her basically like with not a lot of cash. She still was an aristocrat,
Right.
but kind of stole all her prospects. Never loved her, just pretended to love her.
More importantly, stole her heart.
Stole her heart, left her at the altar, and she, at that moment, decided that she was going to do everything in her power to create a banshee of hatred
Right.
that was going to wreak havoc on the society of men.
Yes.
So she raised Stella with the intention of turning her into a loveless robot, and was going
An
to
iceberg with spikes.
Yes, and was going to have boys fall in love with her and then systematically crush their dreams.
Right.
And so this is why Estella, who actually probably feels something for Pip, is like, Pip,
Stay away.
Stay away.
Right.
Because the whole point is that I'm supposed to like hurt people's feelings.
I'm good at it.
And I'm good at it. And Estella and Havisham have this great scene where Estella sort of like blames Havisham for all of this. And Havisham's like, Estella, why won't you obey me and love me? And Estella's like, you raised me not to love anybody. And, and Havisham's like, that's a really great point. And,
I did do that.
And then Estella's like, so I'll do what you want. I'm going to marry the spider, but we're not cool. Like, bye. I don't want to be in your life anymore. I'm taking his money and never seeing you again. And Havisham's like, hoisted by my own petard. And then,
Do you know what that means?
no, I don't think anyone does.
I did. I looked it up recently because it came up in a book and it came up in one of my
It's
book
in Hamlet.
clubs.
That's where it came from.
So it means basically blown up by your own explosive device.
Yeah.
Hoisted to
Yeah.
be blown up, and a petard is like a bomb.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Cool. Anyway, so Estella
Glad you knew that.
abandons her, and Pip confronts her, and I'm blanking on the scene. So Pip confronts her. Miss Havisham sort of lays out everything of what happened, and then steps a little too close to the fireplace. Oh, she asks Pip for forgiveness. Pip confronts her and says, you used me. That was really mean. And Havisham's like, well, so you were poor. And Pip's like, I thought you were giving me money. She's like, no, I paid for your like blacksmith course.
Right.
And she's like, it's not my fault. You read into all this stuff. And Pip's like, well, I just wanted you to know that it's sort of no hard feelings, but that was really mean. You shouldn't have done that. And Havisham steps too close to the fireplace, and her old wedding dress catches on fire, and she runs around, bursts into flames, and Pip puts her out.
Yes.
And she's near death. She pretty much is almost dead. He gets her the medical attention that she needs, and in the moment of her death, she asks Pip for forgiveness, and he forgives her, which is very kind. But Havisham her house was a tinderbox anyway because of all those old things she had lying around.
Right.
And so she sort of has this tragic end of being burst into flames. Okay.
And really, I think that's the moral of the story is just fire safety.
It's
Great.
Yeah.
Stop, drop, and roll is really the takeaway.
Yeah.
That's what I always get out of this book. That's not true.
Okay. And then we'll sort of, where are we at on the...
About 20 more minutes.
Okay. So Pip has a moment of, we haven't been talking about this other subplot. Pip has this moment of realization that he's been an absolute jerkbag, just a jackwagon to Joe back home because
I got nervous right there.
once Joe came to visit him and Pip is like, Joe, I'm going to make you a gentleman. Stop being a blacksmith. I'm going to send you to school and make you smart and you're going to wear fancy clothes. And Joe's like, nope, that's not my life.
Right.
My life is back home. Mrs. Joe, she's died of her injuries, and meanwhile, Joe has married Biddy. The good-hearted country girl who is in love with Pip has married Joe, and they're very happy together. And Joe's sort of living his simple country life.
Which is great,
Which
because
is
Joe is
wonderful.
wonderful, and there's this weird gulf they can no longer cross again.
Yes. They can't be friends anymore because Pip has sort of grown up, and he's been a huge jerk,
Right.
and he's in this different world, and Joe's unwilling to enter into that world, even for the love of Pip, which I think is a really interesting...
Rightfully so, I think. He doesn't want to... He is happy in his nature, and he doesn't want to go against his nature because Pip isn't willing to cross the bridge.
Yeah.
Right? Pip wants him to be something other than he is.
Right.
And Joe's got this little great metaphor, when he talks to Pip. When Pip says, like, hey, Joe, why don't you just, like, leave the forge and come hang out with me? It'll just be like old times, except we're rich. And Joe says, no, I'm not right here. I'm not right in these clothes. I'm not right in this town. He says, life is like different pieces of metal welded together. This is what Joe says, which makes sense because he's a blacksmith, and This is what he knows.
I wonder how often he's used that metaphor.
Every single
Well,
day
I
of
just
his
wonder
life.
if it's like
A horse cart is like pieces of metal welded together.
we get
You know,
it.
chess.
Yeah.
Chess is like pieces of metal welded together.
But I mean, you go with what you know, right? Like,
Yeah,
how many
exactly.
football coaches use
Yes.
like everything is a game of inches?
Yeah.
Life's about getting that extra yard.
Yeah.
Right.
That was great.
If you go with what you know,
Is that a pirate?
Yarr.
Coach, do you think? Yeah.
Aren't they the
I don't know
Tampa
what
Bay
that was.
Buccaneers? All right.
Yeah, thank you. Well done.
So Joe gives Pip this metaphor, and he says, life is like different kinds of pieces welded together. Sometimes there's
Yes.
gold, sometimes there's tin, sometimes there's iron, and this is just life. And different chapters have these different things. We had gold, and now we have silver. We can't recreate the past. I'm going home, and Pip just feels awful because he brought it on himself. He was a real jerkbag to Joe and Biddy when he left. He was like, I'm off to face my destiny. It turns out his destiny was not what he thought it was. And when he tries to go back and relive the past, he can't do it.
Right. Just to make so part of this happens earlier on in the book where Joe is brought to London and is shown around the town. There's also the part after they try and get this escape from Magwitch.
Yep.
It goes
Yeah, we're
horribly
getting there.
wrong.
We're getting there.
You are? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pip has this realization of there's this moment where he has a near death where he gets kidnapped by the guy that conked his sister and he's going to kill her, and then
Yes.
he gets saved by a guy who has the hilarious name of Startop. We haven't talked about him. He's awesome. Anyway, so Pip gets saved and he doesn't die, but has this realization that he's been living a terrible life and he wants to go back to the way things were. Meanwhile, he's got Magwitch. He's got to get Magwitch out of town.
Yes.
And the guy that Magwitch's rival, whose name is Compayson, is also in town. Compayson turns out to be the person that Havisham was going to marry and took off with all her money. It's also the same guy who was on the convict ship that Magwitch fought right at the beginning of the book. This is a Dickens novel, you guys. Everybody knows everybody.
That's what's
It's real convenient.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's stuff like that where it's like, well, he just wanted to tie up the book at the very end, and so
It's a small island.
yeah, exactly.
It feels like a little bit of plot manipulation there,
It
but
does.
Sure.
Anyway,
whatever.
so Compayson, who is going to marry Havisham, is the rival to Magwitch,
Yes.
and they're trying to get Magwitch out of town, and Compayson's going to rat them out. There's a fight on a boat, and Magwitch and Compayson drowns. Magwitch gets run over by a steamboat and bonked on the head by an oar, and he almost dies, and then he does die and has this touching moment where he tells Pip that he loves him, and Pip's like, feels bad that Magwitch dies.
Right.
And now Pip's got all this money. Magwitch is dead, and Pip's like, I am going to go home and relive my old life.
Right.
I'm going to go marry Biddy.
Right.
She was the person I should have married all along. He doesn't know Biddy's married Joe.
Right.
Pip goes home, ready to marry the girl who loved him when he was a child. And he comes home, and Joe's there, and Biddy's there, and she's like, Pip, I'm married to Joe. In fact, we just got married this afternoon. And Pip's like, crap.
Again, real convenient.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Pip, the book, that's essentially where the book ends. There's two endings that come later, and so Pip then decides that he is going to live a simple life. He's obviously not going to go marry Estella and be this like swashbuckling, awesome adventurer.
Hasn't he kind of burned through his cash too?
He's burned through his cash a little bit.
Doesn't he lose his cash? Like, don't they find out that since Magwitch is a
That's right. They
felon-
confiscated all.
That's
The
what I mean.
government.
That's right.
The government takes the cash back because the government finds out that this convict had come back and all the money was his, and so the government is like yoink, and
Yeah.
he
Can't
loses
have
it
that
all.
anymore.
And there's another character who we haven't talked about who's one of my favorites named Wemmick, who basically gives Pip a giant I told you so. The government's always coming for your cash. You should have bought gold bars, buddy.
Okay,
Property.
pause. Can we talk for he's my favorite
Go for
character.
it.
Can I just talk
Yes.
for a second
Oh,
about
can we just
Wemmick?
let's just put a little bow on it.
Yeah, put a bow on it.
Put a little
and
bow
then
on it.
we'll
We can
talk
come
about
back
Wemmick.
to Wemmick. So, and then Pips doesn't have very much money, and him and what's his name? Herbert go into business together, and they become little, like, basically shipping guys. And so they start.
they do pretty well.
They
They
start a
become
little
little
shipping
magnates.
company. Pip lives in India for a while, comes back. Biddy and Joe have a little baby boy that they name Pip, which is very cute.
Yeah.
And then the book ends. Well, I'll just finish the book, then we can come back to Wemmick, because he sort of maybe opens up a good conversation.
You got it.
The book ends with Pip and little baby Pip going for a walk one day to the house, the crazy house where all this happened, and Pip realizes, the house is gone. And while he's there, Estella shows up.
Is this the original ending?
This is the added ending.
the
And Estella shows up and she's like, Pip, I married the spider and he was terrible. And well, she doesn't say this. We learned this. She married the spider. He was terrible. He used to beat Estella. Estella had a horrible life. Luckily for Estella, her husband died when he mistreated a horse and it kicked him in the face. And she then ended up marrying the doctor who treated all of her injuries that she got from getting beaten up by her husband. And he's like, this doesn't look good. And he marries her. He doesn't have very much money. And she sort of lives this poor life with this doctor who seemingly cares for her. She sees Pip and she says, Pip, can you ever forgive me? I was cruel, but I'm no longer cruel. The difficulties of life have taken the cruelty out of me. And Pip kind of has, in my opinion, he sort of has this like kind of lackluster milquetoast, like, yeah, I can forgive you, but he doesn't. I don't know. What's your take on it, maybe?
That they fall in love, and it's a beautiful ending, and
not.
Everything is happy in the end. What do you mean? What do I think happens in the ending? Hey, don't we find? Isn't she Magwitch's daughter?
Oh gosh, we forgot about that little
my
piece
word.
Yes. She's also Magwitch's daughter, the convict. Turns out she's a gypsy child.
Yes, exactly.
We're not being funny.
Forgot about all that.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons that this book made me cranky. Is all of the real convenient coincidences.
That's why I also think that the book eventually turns happy. Right? They reconcile. Life is good afterwards.
They reconcile. I don't think they get married.
If it's
it says so. Here's the ending that Dickens was forced to write because the original ending was a bummer.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So he was forced to write this, and she says, "But you said to me," returned Estella very earnestly, "God bless you, God forgive you. And if you could say that to me then, you will not hesitate to say that to me now. Now, when suffering has been stronger than all other teaching, and has taught me to understand what your heart used to be. I have been bent and broken, but, I hope, into a better shape. Be as considerate and good to me as you were, and tell me we are friends." "We are friends," said I, rising and bending over her as she rose from the bench. "And we will continue friends apart," said Estella. I took her hand in mine, and we went out of the ruined place. And as the morning mist had risen long ago when I first left the forge, so the evening mists were rising now, and in all the broad expanse of tranquil light they showed to me, I saw the shadow of no parting from her.
See? It's love.
It's not love. They're friends.
They end up, but they're together forever.
Apart. She said, "We'll be friends apart."
What is the very end?
I
The
saw
shadow of no parting. What does that mean?
No parting.
What does that mean?
This is the problem, is that nobody knows what that means. I saw the shadow of no parting from her. So either he sees an indication that he gets to stay with her, like the shadow of it. Oh, I see the shadow. Maybe I got to stay with her.
No,
might be there.
Pip, you've already.
Or he sees the shadow of it and he'll never have it. Like it's just sort of there in the background. What could have been.
Oh, I saw the shadow of no parting.
Yeah. No, it's the first one. It's a happy ending.
He just has a little bit of a glimpse of what it could have been like, but he doesn't.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different ways it could be understood, and that kind of drives me bananas.
It does drive me bananas too. I loved the older bummer ending,
but he
better.
had to be forced to write it, so
Yes.
of course he would make it annoying, right?
Yeah, the original ending is that Pip and little Pip are in London one day, and a carriage stops by, and and Pip realizes that it's Estella, and they sort of have this little look. And she basically, like, Pip has learned that she's had a really hard life. And when he sees her in the carriage, he gets the sense that she seems to have softened. And he thinks, oh, maybe the suffering of the world has turned her to a better shape and given her a heart that understands what my heart used to be. So he sees Estella and he says, he sees like the girl he hasn't seen in a long time that used to be in love with. And he's like, she looks like she's doing okay. Not great.
Right.
I heard that she had a rough marriage, but she seems to be doing all right. And it seems that she assumes that little Pip is Pip's son, yes. So she assumes that Pip has gone off and found love. So she's like, okay, he's found somebody. And that's the original ending, and I love that ending. I think that ending is great.
No, it's terrible.
This other ending is confusing. We don't know what's going on.
I don't mind ambiguous endings. One of my favorite novels, The Magus by John Fowles, you don't know which ending it is. Like, he leaves it ambiguous whether the people get together or not. But he writes it well enough. Yeah. This one just seems like needless, shadowy obfuscation where I'm kind of frustrated that he didn't just write it more clearly. Yeah. Right?
Again, probably because he was forced to do it. He did not want it to end that way, is what it sounds like.
Sure.
But obviously, it's the right ending.
There's lots of different paths that of really interesting inquiry that you can take with this book. One is comparing it to Gatsby, which we do with this school, because you've got two similar kinds of characters: people that are poor that suddenly become rich, that have these desires that go unmet and unfulfilled. Gatsby ends up dead in a swimming pool. Pip ends up like a middle class shipping baron. Right. Those are, like, to me, highlight America and England. Like they're very, one's a very American story of extremities, and one's a very British story of like, you know, the good life is knowing your place and staying there, right?
But it's funny because I imagine that would be a message you appreciate. You've talked about ambition a few times on the podcast, and this seems like a warning again. It's a warning against great expectations.
Yeah,
right?
I think that Pip comes to a conclusion about what the good life is, but the other sort of harrowing thing to think of is that what it took for him to learn that was the destruction of it. Like he couldn't go back and get Biddy. He couldn't go home and live there again. He couldn't go back to the thing that he had. And now he's kind of has to make do with building that somewhere else with his friend Herbert Pocket and working at this, at building this little business job of his. And so there's almost like a cautionary tale too of, you know, if you take risks, if you do go out, if you try to sort of punch above your weight or push beyond your lot, you could wreck where you've come from.
Sure.
Is one way to think, is one way to interpret it.
Yeah, because I don't think he would have been happy with Biddy.
No, you don't think, yeah.
I don't think that him going, I don't remember specifically the ending, so please tell me when I'm wrong about this, but he continues in the shipping business.
He does.
Doesn't he? And that's not the like at-home life that Biddy and Joe have.
Correct.
And
He's gone to India, he travels a lot.
And so he will need to find someone else who is okay with that life as opposed to Biddy, who wouldn't be.
That's fair.
I think he has this, in both cases, he's
romanticized.
Yes, and he's romanticized what it is to be a gentleman, and then he's romanticized what it is to be a common person. And he actually ends up existing somewhere in the middle between those two. He's not kind of the leisurely rich who don't do anything with their life, and he's not a blacksmith working every day. He's an entrepreneur, a business owner, or whatever.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good way to think about it, is the dangers of romanticizing things, the dangers of sort of like building a story for yourself and then trying to live that story when it doesn't correspond to reality is a recipe for not being very happy, either on the gentleman end or on the blacksmith end.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like pretty common coming of age story where you sort of loathe the thing you were and romanticize all the things you weren't. Am I just repeating what you said?
No, it's good.
And I mean, this happens with every person, right? You think your parents are kind of foolish bumpkins, and then you think,
grow up and
so even if you're rich, you're like, man, I wish I could like get into the real meat of life and not be so protected. And then you find out, well, that actually kind of sucks. And if you're poor, you think, man, if I could just have some money, everything would be great. And then you realize, well, that's not that great either. And I feel like it's something everybody has to go through at some point, is realizing that, wow, I thought this other life was going to be cool. It's just not.
But I think that's your point of you then have to go through the like that crushing moment of getting the thing you want. Like the tragedy for Pip is that he gets the status he wants, he gets the wealth he wants. It's miserable. He then has it all forcibly taken away from him. So at the point where he could use his wealth better, he no longer has it. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it still feels like a tragedy at each step of the way, even though I think he's immeasurably better off in the end, even in the bad ending. For
sure.
His life is better than it was when...
if he had stayed a blacksmith or
stayed a gentleman, I think he would have been miserable too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there is I mean, Pip's life is definitely marked with sort of like serendipity. There's nothing that Pip usually does to get himself. You're right. His ending is happy, and it's happy almost in spite of him.
Yes.
And just as his wealth he got it in spite of himself.
Sure.
And so Pip kind of like, stumbles upwards.
Does he end up happy for Joe and Biddy?
He does, very much.
Okay.
And he loves little Pip.
He does.
And no, he is very much happy. And whenever he goes there every Christmas, and whenever he's back in town, he will stay with them. And I think he sort of reluctantly realizes that Biddy is much better off with Joe than with him.
Right.
Going back and wanting to marry Biddy was definitely like,
it was like flailing.
It was like, yes, that's a great word for it.
I need to get away. I need to fix this. Biddy's my solution. And thank goodness she had married Joe that afternoon, or else Biddy would be miserable.
Yes, right. She was the one person that loved me back in the day, and I'm going to go. And
just grasping to recreate the past when you can't.
So maybe we save Wemmick for the in-between, because we got to set it up. But maybe why? So you like this book a lot, or this book has been kind of like on a one of those books for you, right?
Yeah, eventually.
What was the topic, or what was the theme that really sort of resonated?
Again, I think at this point it's an in-between conversation, but in what you are talking about right now, there are these three different views toward one's work and one's personal life, I guess. So three kind of approaches to how to either balance those or how to look at both of those.
The Jaggers, the Wemmick, and the Joe, that kind of thing.
And I think that those set up. I think the book very clearly has a view on which one is right. I think it's more complicated, and this discussion is showing me it's more complicated because Pip doesn't end up neatly into one of those categories at the end. I guess it doesn't say whether he's like a Jaggers and is cruel and harsh or anything. Because he could be. Yeah. We don't know.
I think that sounds like another, that's going to feed into a great in-between episode.
Yes.
So just to sort of finish it, the book is delightful. The characters are memorable. If you've read Dickens, you sort of know what you're in for. You've got great writing. It's very hilarious. There's moments of it that are very funny. But there are moments of it that are a little like eye-rolly, like really, like Magwitch is Stella's dad. It just sort of seems like a
little too convenient.
It seems like season 6 of a show that sort of should have ended in season 4. You know,
yeah. Because I will say I did not like this book the first time I read it in high school. It was required reading, and I liked it very much when going through AJ's Great Books course 6 years or whatever it was. That was when I read it, and it meant something more to me. I don't think it's a book that. This is probably what you experienced with seniors. It's not really for seniors.
No,
you need to have left something. You need to have taken risk and kind of grappled with the meaning of that.
And sat in the weight of that risk for a while to see it kind of play itself out in your life a little bit.
For the book to then have something to say to the reader. So, But it's a great book.
Which is why I think, some of the more fruitful conversations I had with seniors in this book were when Pip was a little child, and the things and the way that a little child sees the world and then is influenced by the world is kind of is a really fascinating thing at the beginning. And then also where do and this is why I wanted to start the podcast with that question. I think most kids grow up feeling like they have expectations on them. But as you get older, at least this is my case, when I go back and I kind of tease out those expectations, I think like 80% of them were ones that I kind of seem to have made up for myself or just sort of absorbed from the world around me. I can't remember a time where my parents sat me down and said, "We really want you to succeed and go to college." But there felt like there was an expectation. And so like, where did the genesis of our thoughts about what we want in our life, where do those things come from? For Pip, it was one moment of a pretty rich girl telling him that he was sucked. But I just think that's an interesting question of like, if we go back and do what Pip is doing, which is at the end, not the end of his life, at the end of a big chapter of his life, he's looking back on his past and tracing through his development. If we were to do that to ourselves, do we have big Estella moments or not? But where do our views of what we think a good life is or the expectations that we've put on ourselves, how do those things kind of develop? I think is a really fascinating question. Yeah. And I think something worthwhile for each individual person to kind of like do that kind of self-reflection. Because if you don't, and if you just run on autopilot, well, Pip didn't really have any sort of self-reflection until everything kind of exploded and he went back and he was like, oh, these are all the mistakes I made. Could Pip have avoided some of that heartache had he been a little more self-reflective younger? I don't know.
Because the answer might be no.
Yeah, you're right. The answer might be no.
Because, I'll have to think about that.
Yeah. Anyway, that's Great Expectations.
Right. Well, this has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. The in-between episodes that Graham was talking about, you can find on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/classical stuff.
Nailed it.
And you can support us there. If you at the low levels, you just get, commercial-free episodes, which you're probably getting right now anyway. And then if you bump up to the higher episodes, you get sort of our in-between episode banter, and then there are extra goodies after that if you are interested.
A monthly AMA, so people at that middle tier can ask us questions that we'll answer, and usually, they're more than an hour long.
Oh, yeah, I think our last one was like an hour and a half, wasn't it?
Super long, but they're really fun.
Anyway, you can also email us at theguys@classicalstuff.net. You can tweet at us at CLSSCAL stuff.
Yep.
And then I think, and our website, classicalstuff.net. You can check us out there. And I think that's it. So this is the boys from Classical Stuff signing off.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.